Welcome to this session on Doughnut Economics for Business and Finance. I'm Erinch Sahan. I'm the Business and Enterprise Lead at Doughnut Economics Action Lab. We have an amazing grouping of people today. We're going to treat this as a three-part session. We've got 90 minutes together. At the beginning, I'm going to give a brief introduction to Doughnut Design for Business, which is our tool for the way that businesses can engage with Doughnut Economics. After a short introduction from me, which will include some slides, we're then going to move into two very engaging conversations with people that are engaged in these very ideas of how do we design businesses in order to help humanity into the donut. We're going to have one focused on steward ownership, a second one focused on worker and employee ownership, democratic business models, and we're going to come back at the end with a broader discussion with some Q&A as well. So throughout, I encourage you to put your questions into the Q&A, into the chat function of the webinar as well. I'll be accumulating these for the final 30 minutes that we'll have with all of our panelists, where we'll be exploring the ideas and the questions that come up and arise. So let me begin by sharing my screen and giving an introduction to Doughnut Design for Business. But first, this is what our panel looks like today. Let me just switch my view around. And what you see is an amazing collection of people who are ready to explore some of the more challenging but critical aspects of the way we design businesses, particularly ownership models. We've got Margot Dalal from Seed Commons, who'll be joining Kurt Leon from Transform Finance and David Lids from Appalachian Field Services in our second panel to talk about worker ownership models and particularly the finance journey for those sorts of worker-owned enterprises. In our first panel, which will be led by Annika Schneider from Purpose Economy, on the right that you can see, we'll be joined by Stefan Schenk from Stapelstein and Laura Herkel from Purpose Evergreen Capital, who will be looking at the steward ownership model in particular and looking at the journey that Stapelstein has gone through in its own steward ownership conversion and how it has engaged investors and finance in that journey. So we're first going to have a brief introduction to Doughnut Design for Business. We're all here because what we are interested in is reversing this picture, right? We want to get humanity into the donut. We want to eliminate the overshoot on the ecological ceiling that you are seeing, and we want to also cut back on the shortfall on essentials of life that we're all also experiencing around the world. And business and finance has a critical role to play. In the last few years, we've seen a reversal of some of the initial enthusiasm for ESG, sustainability, and other buzzwords that have emerged in the business space as corporates have become less ambitious, and the mainstream design of business has really demonstrated how it can hold businesses back from pursuing the kind of transition and transformations that are essential to help humanity into the donut. Meanwhile, we have accelerated our use of materials. We have also seen, including today, a huge news from financial markets that are saying, actually, we're on the right track. This is the right direction of travel. You would have seen huge jumps in stock markets this morning if you follow the financial markets. But all along, what we're seeing is a mismatch between the indicators of financial and business success on the one hand, and the indicators of social and ecological success on the other. The economy is telling us we're doing well, whereas ecological and social impact is getting worse. So we need to reverse this. And this is going to happen through a redesign of business. What we have created at Doughnut Economics Action Lab, working with dozens of organizations around the world, and now over 900 businesses around the world, is a set of materials that have come together in a tool called Doughnut Design for Business. And what it does is it builds on the work and thinking of author and theorist Marjorie Kelly that says to understand the deep design of business, the DNA, the core of business, we must explore its purpose, its networks, its governance, its ownership, and its finance. And what we look at is how do we go from the left-hand side, which is about how does a design of business block transformative action, towards the right-hand side. How could a redesign of business unlock transformative action? Now, a community of practice has now emerged. So if you're new to this conversation, you're thinking, look, there's something about the donut. I want to use this in my work. How do I do it? Well, the invitation is to join this community of practice, which is now nearly 100 organizations around the world who are taking the tool that I've just mentioned, using it in their work. They're completing a self-declaration form, which allows them to be listed as a values-aligned organization on the Deal platform and be listed amongst these organizations around the world who are using this to run workshops with business communities, individual companies, with business leaders to help them go through a journey of enterprise redesign through the perspective of Doughnut Economics. These organizations, some of them are values-aligned consultancies, some of them are business networks, others are business incubators or business schools that work directly with entrepreneurs and different companies. But what they have in common is that they are engaging directly with businesses as their clients or parts of their network, and that they have an ambition to drive more transformative change. So if you go to doughuteconomics.org, on the left-hand side, you will see the community drop-down. You can see organizations and networks. You can filter for business workshops, and you will see the picture. So if you're a business that's joining this and wants support from people, don't come to us. Don't ask Doughnut Economics to help, because we've created and supported this community of practice that is ready, has all the materials at hand and all the support that they need within those materials for them to engage with you as a company on Doughnut Economics. So let's sit back and let's think about the concepts through a very rapid introduction to the ideas that underpin everything I'm talking about. On the one hand, to get within the donut, within the planetary boundaries, we're going to need to adopt regenerative practices across the economy. So ecologically regenerative ideas such as modular product design, or designing factories as forests, or making sure we've got circular fabrics across the fashion sector, or making sure that we can restore nutrient loops such as Sanergy Toilets does with affordable toilets where the human waste is treated, sanitized, and put back into agriculture. What these have in common is a deep sense of ambition in the way that they design themselves, so that their products, their processes, their operations are working with and within the cycles of the living world. It's drawing from concepts like circular economy and biomimicry in order to adopt those practices, those actions. But on the other hand, we also need the social side to be addressed. So we need distributive practices which are sharing value far more equitably with all who co-create that value, and sharing opportunity far more equitably as well. And the examples are emerging across the world that are deliberately designing their engagement with workers, with communities, with consumers, with governments in a way where it's deliberately distributive by design. And these are the kinds of practices that we need to unlock. Now, at the heart of the Doughnut Economics perspective that we have been testing, engaging, and developing over the last years is a realization that to drive this into the mainstream, to have ecologically regenerative and socially distributive business actions and strategies at the mainstream of the economy, we're going to need a deeper transformation. And that transformation can happen through a number of ways. We recognize the critical and essential nature of so many different ways of achieving this. It could be through regulation and exerting public pressure. It's absolutely pivotal to have, whether it's trade unions or consumer groups or community organizations, as well as smart, effective, and well-implemented regulations that are making sure that the playing field is leveled and there's an ambition for the broader economy. We also need to see much deeper and more ambitious, enlightened leadership as well among leaders of businesses of all kinds and across all sectors. We need to see much better reporting of impact, understanding of impact, commitment to targets that are going to drive the business's success. And we also need to make sure that we're able to make the business case much more effectively. There is no business, there is no profit on a dead planet or in a society that is falling apart. overall, in the long term, getting inside the donut is a broader economic case. And there's a case for the resilience of businesses as well, who are able to become fit for the future and retain a social license to operate. So all of these are essential levers for change, and we respect and support all of these. But we want to also underpin that for these to be effective, we need businesses designed to support and not hinder these efforts. That means that to reinforce them and to drive the kind of ambition that Doughnut Economics needs, we focus on transforming the deep design of business. Because unless we also make sure that businesses are focused on the needs of communities and the planet and nature, they're going to fight against the regulations. They're going to hold back the ambitious action driven by communities or workers. We're also going to see businesses holding back enlightened leaders, as we've seen so many corporate leaders in recent years held back by the model of ownership or governance. We're also starting to see targets being set, but the action not following. So a lot of great number crunching, science-based targets initiative was mentioned in an earlier slide, huge amounts of corporate commitments, but the action isn't following for so many of the companies. And the business case as well is too narrow and too financial. So in order to make these other levers of change effective and successful, we're going to also need to transform the deep design of companies so they lean in to those changes rather than fight against and try to avoid them. So that's where Doughnut Economics focuses. And at the heart of it, it's a transition from that 20th century question that underpins enterprise design, which asks how much value can we extract through this enterprise, and a move towards a 21st century version of that question that must underpin the deep design of business. How many benefits can we generate through this enterprise? So we've normally got a long list of examples for this, but a quick run through, whether it's purpose, we can look at examples like Tony's Chocolonely and others that are saying, look, our purpose is something bigger than profit. In their case, 100% slave-free becoming the norm in chocolate, and implemented through a mission lock, through guardian shares that are making sure the purpose is at the heart of decision-making. Networks, those deep relationships across supply chains, for instance, that El Puente is able to ensure through having a model where it is co-owned and co-governed by the supply chain as well as its own workers. Examples such as Faith in Nature that are saying, let's put nature on the board through having a board seat for lawyers for nature in the UK. Or examples like Patagonia that have taken inspiration from the steward ownership model to say, hey, let's make Earth our only shareholder. And examples like Selco in India, which are saying, let's design our internal reinvestment so that we can ambitiously pursue the business model of creating decentralized and energy access that is based on solar and renewable energy across rural communities in India. All of these are successful businesses, but they also have underpinning them a deep design in usually their ownership model or their governance model and their relationship with finance. And that relationship with finance is at the heart of so much of this. We've already got on this panel a representative from Transform Finance, Kurt, who can talk much more about some of these ideas, but we're starting to see a huge explosion of innovation here. This is where alternatives to venture capital, for instance, are emerging. We're seeing examples like revenue-based finance or convertible grants or crowdfunding and mezzanine debt, and ideas such as systemic investing or exit to community start to inspire new models of finance that are redefining the relationship between business and its investors. So much of the redesign of business happens through these, and that's why today's panel will focus a lot more on that relationship between investors and finance on the one hand, and the enterprise and founders on the other, to see how to navigate that more effectively to make all of this a reality. I also want to mention we've just done a bit of a soft launch, a quiet launch of 14 case studies that are available as one of our tools at doughuteconomics.org. You can find it in the business and enterprise thematic page as well. And these are amazing examples that essentially tell the story of businesses, very diverse businesses of all kinds, from steward-owned companies to cooperatives and mutuals to businesses that are deploying different sorts of social enterprise structures and different models of governance and ownership. But they're telling the story of something interesting and unique that is happening in that business that is enabled and unlocked through the deep design of the business, something happening in the way it's being designed. So that relationship between what the company does and how the company is structured, that is at the heart of Doughnut Design for Business. Some key tips to focus on, because we've been drawing from and learning from business practitioners around the world that are using these ideas and models in so many different ways. One is to focus on the practical ideas that need unlocking. We need to unlock circular design. We need to unlock deep and committed relationships with workers and the communities, for instance. Focusing on that is a critical starting point. The second is to explore diverse enterprise design ideas to enable those possibilities. So some of the ideas, the off-the-shelf models you hear about are fantastic, but we need deeper innovation, more bespoke models that are appropriate for the specific context of the business. We need to redesign that relationship with finance, as I mentioned in the previous slides. We need to also engage in policy and public policy at national level, at local level, that can be supportive of these sorts of models. And critically, and maybe most essentially, we need to make this fun. It's about the future. We're designing and creating the enterprise of the future economy that we must all co-create together. So as I mentioned at the beginning, if you want to be a practitioner of this, you want to use this with your clients, for instance, then we have a process for signing up to become one of those organizations that are listed as on our website. It's really for anyone that truly is values aligned and ambitious on this, and we've got a vibrant community now of those organizations. But everything we do, everything that we are focused on is available at doughnuteconomics.org. Again, if you go to the themes, business and enterprise, there's a lot more detail on everything I said, including the policies and processes for engaging with Doughnut Economics with a focus on business. So having said all that, exactly 15 minutes in, I'm going to pass over to my first panel, to Annika from Purpose Economy, who's going to unpack the idea of steward ownership and that transition and the engagement between steward ownership of a company and investors in making this a reality. So Annika, I'll stop sharing and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you so much. You can hear me well, right? Perfect. Yes, when I woke up this morning, I thought, to be honest, that it's a good day for a hopeful story. And that's what we'll do in the next 25 minutes. We'll hopefully bring a hopeful story to all of you. Erinch mentioned in the little briefing before our call that ownership is actually the heart of the matter. And that's my bridge from his introduction to ours, because our ownership is not just a heart of the matter. Ownership, in our opinion, is the deep design. It's the DNA of a company. It's the thing, the operating system that determines every decision, every management layer in a company. And if I look back into my own career, my own path into the realms of ownership, I was working, or I scored this really amazing position after graduating from university, you know, as a, I don't know, member entrepreneur in residence at a startup. And I thought, you know, this is it. I'm really going to be in a power position. I can shape this company. I can design the, you know, the transition to becoming a great and impactful company. But after, well, I had overseen one little detail. It was very heavily investor backed. And pretty much 5 minutes after I entered that company on my first day, I noticed what that means and how ownership affects me. Namely, I had nothing to say. Every decision was dictated from the top, well, not even from the top, from very far away absentee owners who told us which countries to expand to, how many people we would have to let go. So I felt what ownership means very early on, and that shaped my own pathway. Now, in the traditional sense, money equals power, right? Ownership means if you have money, you can buy power. And there's many entrepreneurs out there, many investors out there who say this conventional understanding of ownership does not fit with my values. It does not fit with my company. It does not fit with the way I want to act, I want to work, I want to live. So they do something brave. They are thinking about ownership, and by doing that, they actually just following in the footsteps of pioneers who have done this already 100 years ago. Who I'm naming some names. In Denmark, we have, for instance, the big foundation companies like Carlsberg or like Novo Nordisk. In Germany, we have Bosch or Zeiss, very big companies. And they already 100 years ago thought about, how can I as a company put profits as a means to an end and not as the end in itself? And how can I make sure that the purpose comes first, comes before the profit motivation? they did that, and until 10 years ago, that's a lot of them did that, but what was missing was a shared understanding, a shared language, a shared narrative around this. And that's when the Purpose Foundation was founded. We researched these pioneers, we gave this concept a name, we coined it to steward ownership. And since what happened afterwards, I don't know if you know bamboo, how bamboo is growing. It's like first it's making a lot of roots under the earth, and then it really starts to grow high. And we're currently in this growth phase. So we see entrepreneurs from all over the globe starting to rethink their ownership structures, culminating in, for instance, Patagonia transitioning openly or officially to steward ownership. We have investors who are starting to think about the way they do investments. We have funds that are popping up all over the world who say we want to invest in steward-owned companies. And we have change maker organizations who say this is such an interesting concept. I want to bring this into my own local ecosystem. I want to build a local ecosystem for this. Now, the question remains, why do they do this, right? This sounds good, but what does that actually mean for a company, for the economy, for us as societies? And in general, from the historical examples, we've seen that steward-owned companies have been broadly successful, meaning they have survived much longer than conventionally owned companies. They outperform on different metrics. They are more resilient, especially in crises. They treat their employees better. They pay their employees better. They have better retention rates. They have a very strong reputation. And there's even studies that show that crime rates and divorce rates in steward-owned companies are lower than in conventional owned companies. So you see, I'm burning for this topic. I love steward ownership. And today I would really like to bring some of this magic, some of this energy that I experienced with working with these entrepreneurs into this panel. And that's my moment to invite my panelists, Stefan and Laura, to this panel. And we'll hear Stefan's story, being the founder of a company called Stapelstein. I'm going to use the German pronunciation, but I'm meaning Stapelstein. It's a company based in Germany, but they're selling their products in over 40 countries. And Stefan will tell us in a sec what they actually do. Laura is investment manager at Purpose Evergreen Capital, which is a fund specifically set up to invest in steward-owned companies. And we'll hear her story and what Purpose Evergreen Capital is doing and how they're doing it. So thank you too. Thanks for you two to be here, to be on this panel. First, Stefan, I'd love to talk to you first. Can you tell us a bit more about Stapelstein? What is a Stapelstein, and can you give us a few facts about your company?
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure being here for this meaningful conversation. I think I start with some visuals since the picture says more than 1,000 words. So I will hold my screen here, and you can see some of our elements and the children playing with it, being in playful movement with our design products for some first impressions. And then I will switch over to why we are there, what our purpose is about. And we at Stapelstein, and this is like how the whole journey started, we believe in the well-being of families supported by the power of playful movement with our design products. And therefore we design and craft sustainable monomaterial modular products. We had the modularity before when Erinch shared some examples that are circular and harmoniously integrate the material form and function. So we try to use or to empower children with our products to playfully move. And with this original purpose that never changed from the very beginning, we grew to a company that now has 40 employees, mainly female persons in leading positions. I founded the whole thing, so this, as a founder, I can't change my gender here. Yeah, we are a female-driven company in general, and we have our main markets in the German-speaking countries, so Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. We have strong markets in the Netherlands, Belgium, in eastern part of Germany, the Czech Republic, Slovenia, and Poland. And we just started a subsidiary in the US, so we are also present in the United States. Our revenue last year was 16 million euros, so that you get a picture of our impact and our size. Yeah, and we are structured as a teal organization, meaning that we work in circles and in roles, and our meetings are structured in governance meetings where we work at the or on the structural parts of our company, and then we have the tactical meetings that are like for operational day-to-day business topics that we discuss there. Yeah, and maybe a very current topic is that we opened our first physical store in Berlin, where people can experience our products, our purpose, and our story firsthand. And yeah, in one face-to-face conversations with sometimes with myself and the great employees that are also joining me on this venture.
Well, I think Annika has just frozen.
Okay.
But yeah,
I'm back. I'm back.
You're back. Yeah, that was...
Sorry, my internet is weird. Stefan, thanks. I would love to. So you said you're 60 million in revenues now, and you only started 8 years ago. Can you take us back to the beginning when you were a design student and this was a university project? What happened back then? Which decision did you make, and why? How did you come to regret it later on in your career?
Sure. No, I'm very happy to share this journey. So back in the days 2015, I was studying product design at the University of Schwäbisch Gmünd, and this was my project in the 4th semester. So I was in the middle of my studies, and I was exhibiting this project, which back in the days it was simple prototypes that I exhibited together with a video that would prove the concept. Yeah, and on this exhibition, I met an angel investor that would would inspire me to create a company and to bring this purpose or this product to the market. And I thought, like as a student, this is a dream. Like if your idea becomes reality, this is this is a new next step. And I was intrigued by that idea that I could really change something for the children and the families out there to create free movement and free play through these products. So I in this fascination and through that inspiration, I was founding a regular gmbH, which is like basic company structure in Germany, with this one angel investor that brought in a second angel investor, and both of them invested 50,000 euros. And because I didn't really think about the ownership structure, we were just dividing the company between the three of us, meaning that with me, there were like 33% remaining, and the other two investors had, the other parts, the 66 point something percent. And from there, I was building and bootstrapping a company with this 100,000 euros and brought it to the first profits in the year of 3 years later, in the year of 2019. And with this first profits, for me, it was like starting with this purpose and believing in this purpose. It was crystal clear that I would reinvest this money. But my other shareholders had other ideas, and they really wanted to get this money out of the company and have their private profit here and their dividends. And this was it changed everything that back then, because it was like I'm a beekeeper as a side fact, and if you want to have a sustainable beehive, you don't take out all the honey. You leave as much honey as the bees need to sustainably get into the next year, and they just wanted to get all the honey of our company, and that didn't feel right back in the days. So I knew there's something wrong in our statutes. So I was researching and trying to find any detail or niche in our contracts to get out of this situation. But the main problem was that our design protection was laying within the company, so I could not like get it out of the company. So I was in the situation to either leave the company myself personally, but kind of donate the idea, and they could just like keep going like they wanted to in this very capitalistic way, or I would kind of get them out of the company. But there was no way to get them out without loads of money, and being very frustrated and also blocked. So all my creativity was blocked and I was kind of frozen. I heard about steward ownership, and I was contacting you guys, and we were in first conversations, and through a 2-year conversation with the shareholders and negotiations, we finally made it to transform Stapelstein into a steward-owned company, meaning that the 2 shareholders left the company and I could 100% focus on the purpose and being free again. And this is maybe like the sentence that brings everything together. We are standing for free play. So I was asking myself, how could we stand for free play if we are not free ourselves as a company?
So nice.
Thanks, Stefan. That's exactly the bridge that we're going to now throw to Laura, because that's the moment when you two met, and when your 2 organizations found each other, you looking for a solution to get out of the stalemate, and Laura, as an investor for steward-owned companies, being able to help you. So I'd love to ask Laura, or shine my spotlight on Laura for a sec. Laura, Purpose Evergreen Capital is an investment fund that invests in steward-owned companies. Why was it founded? What does it do at the moment?
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having me as well. Well, I'm with Purpose Evergreen Capital. I sometimes say PEC, so it's the abbreviation. Well, it's an investment company, as you said, providing patient value-aligned capital only for steward-owned companies. And mainly we invest in phases where capital is needed for the transitioning into steward ownership, also for growth capital and succession cases. And actually, it was really born out of the necessity, as you already implied now, because there are these situations where companies need to transform, and this kind of capital was not available back then. So our goal was not, hey, let's open a fund, but we really saw the necessity in the market of thinking the quality of capital in a totally new way. So that is when PEC was founded more or less 4 or 5 years ago, and we're trying to reinvent a little bit how to provide capital. And current investments are, for example, mostly European companies, for example, like the Dutch pioneering healthcare company Buurtzorg. And we've also invested into organically grown company, a US-based organic retailer. And that's also how we met.
Thanks. Erinch posted 2 case studies in the chat that you can all download or read, because the role of PEC gets a bit clearer too. But that's my next question, Laura. So you 2 met. What did you do? How did you help Stefan to solve this stalemate?
Yeah, you know, we really met in the situation where what Stefan really described very lively, like this blockage situation. And it was really also a little bit shocking for us. I mean, we see different phases, but it was really like to see there's a company with great energy and great spirit, but it was totally blocked in this situation of not being able to move. And then obviously, like the conventional money wasn't an option because it wouldn't have solved the blockage that you also described before. So that is like, so the conventional money was not an option. So that is when you learned about PEC and that steward ownership aligned financing, that's how we call it usually, does exist. And that was like the conversation we had, that it allows you to regain the power and to really get the control back, but at the same time do get the money you need to buy out those, in that case, to buy out those or previous investors, to also to give them the opportunity to lead on their path.
So Laura, you mentioned now what Stefan did. Could you pinpoint again for everyone what is a steward-owned company? What is now the exact difference?
Yeah, I think we've heard it before, Erinch. I think you also pointed it out in your entry. It's like really about the deep design of the business. Annika also said it. So in the control of the company lies within the company, and the profits, they are made for a purpose and not just, they are not an end to itself. So in that case of Stapelschein, it really means that all the voting rights got back to the team, to the stewards, the ones who really know and do execute everything in the company. And the profits stay within the company, in this case, or stay within the company, which means they are reinvested into the company. Or Erinch, you also said they can be distributed in a socially fair way. So maybe, you know, used for the company to strive and to fulfill its purpose. And also in parts, they're used to cover capital costs, like it was in our case, because obviously we don't, it's not an option to provide free capital, but we, yeah, that's like the core I would describe.
Thanks. Yeah, cool. Stefan, if you compare now the investment, how it was before, the relationship that you had with the investors, and now the relationship that you have with PEC, how do you experience it now? Can you tell us a bit about your collaboration?
Sure. I think I would like to compare it with our main topic, which is like designing great products for families. And if you are with children, you often see that like adults would not treat them on eye level, but there are parents that treat them on eye level and see them on eye level. And I would take this picture to describe the difference. So before the transformation, I didn't have the feeling that I talk with my shareholders on eye level, because they really let me feel that they have the power and that I'm the minority. And now with PEC, we really have like, yeah, conversations on eye level, and we can talk to each other. We don't build bubbles to impress each other. We honestly and directly talk to each other as soon as there's something to be spoken, and we try to help each other. So it's a very supportive collaboration that I experience.
Yeah, I can add on maybe like a little, like sort of a practical thing. I feel it the same way like you do. I like the parenting picture. We've actually talked about it in our, with our colleagues as well, that we're really trying to reframe this. But like in practical, I would also say if you have a topic you talk about, you bring it into the room and you find a solution together, instead of both parties bringing a solution into the room and discussing it. And also, like, rather than thinking of all the things that, I think that's really a conventional investment habit, let's say, to really think about all the bad things that could happen and try to let's say, solve them in the beginning. We try to include more a process that allows and that defines that we'll always talk to each other, and that there's always a conversation that takes in both sides, both views, and that we'll find like the best solution, fulfilling, if possible, all needs.
Laura, if you now go out in the investment world and you tell other investors about this, what do they say? What do they say? What do they think? Are there other ones interested? Can you tell us a bit about the world that you see out there?
Yeah, well, it depends on who you ask. If you go out there, I mean, it's still a pioneering approach, and it's still light years away from conventional VC money or private equity money. So I think, it's still a way to go. But actually, over the course of the last years, as you use this bamboo picture, I think it works for this. We really see more and more capital providers, like popping up out of the ground, and there's a very strong interest in our work, and that's also very nice about our work. That part of our of my daily work is also to share my knowledge with them, and we really see this interest rising. So for example, there are existing funds opening buckets just for steward ownership even in a 2-digit million euro volume. And there's also family offices thinking to include this into their investment strategy. And there's also many, many private individuals or angel investors who are really already doing it. And yeah, so I think all in all, it's still pioneering, but I think there's very good reason to be hopeful that this is growing, and we're also working on that and trying to boost that or enable that.
Cool. Looking at the clock, we have to come to an end, but I prepared a very short rapid fire. So I would like to ask 2 questions to each of you, and you have 1 sentence or 1.5 sentences to answer them. So Laura, let's start with you. What's your favorite part of being an investor in steward-owned or for steward-owned companies?
Well, I think looking back at this, being this now for 3.5 years, I think it's really the underlying positive image of human nature, because I think like really not doubting in the beginning, but really having the positive image in the beginning and assuming the best. I think it really makes a difference, and it's such a beauty about about my everyday work. A little pathetic, but it's
what? No, I love it. What does an investor get out of it?
Yeah, that's like, you could think, okay, it sounds very nice, but who's actually really doing it? Or okay, 1 sentence. So I think investors do get a fair return. And as you also pointed out with the data, I think from the risk profile, this is a very interesting investment. And then you have the add-on of the experience of a different kind of relationship.
Thanks. Stefan, what was the biggest thing that changed for you since you transitioned to steward ownership?
So I think it's the interactions with our customers, since it transforms everything. When I know, based on our statutes, that our promises we make cannot be undermined by ownership structures behind the scenes. Yeah. So
cool.
So
if you founded another company, another Stapelstein, would you choose steward ownership right from the start?
I would never change that anymore. So I would always try to found a company in a steward ownership model. Yes.
Cool. Thanks. Well, with that hopefully positive, hopeful message, we'll hand over either back to Erinch or over to Kurt.
Thank you, Annika. No, that was a wonderful exploration of some of the real life challenges and some of the necessities for us to redesign business if we want to unlock action, if we're not just focused on the things that currently aren't moving the needle, and that we need to unlock the action needed, whether it's the internal investment, it's the enabling of taking on strategies that we need for businesses to help this transition, to help humanity into the donut. That was an amazing introduction. We're going to move from steward ownership now to worker ownership models. And I can't think of an organization that is better equipped to drive this conversation than Transform Finance. Their work on alternative ownership enterprises is groundbreaking, it's pioneering, and it is focused on finance. It is focused on how do we talk to investors? Where is the finance that is available for this? Holding a real world perspective on an exciting idea, meanwhile remaining connected to some of the most exciting models, such as those that you're about to hear now. So Kurt, I'm going to pass it over to you for the next 25 minutes. A reminder to everyone, put your questions into the chat or the Q&A, and I'll be pulling them up for the final session where we all come together and have one big discussion.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Erinch, and thank you so much also to the Purpose team and Stapelstein for that really, really amazing conversation. I've been personally such a fan of the steward ownership models that Purpose has been pioneering in Germany and beyond, across Europe and now globally. And I think all of the points that were brought up, you're going to hear in this conversation as well, as we talk about employee ownership, particularly the cooperative model. So definitely keep drawing those lines and asking questions, and we'll bring it all together at the end to kind of like form this big big picture of what enterprise design really looks like when we're trying to transform the economy. So first, I just wanted to give a quick intro to Transform Finance for those who aren't familiar. So we're a nonprofit organization based here in the US that creates insights and actionable strategies for all those stakeholders who seek to challenge legacy investment approaches and seed new transformative investment models. We've been around since about 2013, looking at strategies across the entire investment ecosystem that are building out what a new model of finance can really look like, particularly one that balances power and benefit between investors and other stakeholders. So we really look at this question of power and, who's calling the shots in driving the economy through capital. So again, a lot of that was discussed in the prior conversation about steward ownership, thinking about how do you kind of rejigger the enterprise so that investors are not, sitting in a skyscraper somewhere and telling you what to do in your operations. Throughout our entire journey, the question of ownership has been a real through line for everything. Communities really care about it. Business owners care about it. There are mission-driven investors who care about it. And we really don't think that we can build a new system without really tackling this question. And this is one that we've been working with Erinch and the Doughnut Economics Action Lab on for a while, really thinking about, what does design look like? What are the models that are embodying this? So that's how we came up with this kind of umbrella term of alternative ownership enterprise, which kind of captures the steward ownership models, the employee ownership models, community ownership. There's a lot of ways that folks are engaging different stakeholders besides investors in both the governance and the economic participation in the business. And we feel that all of these kind of form this constellation of approaches that are building kind of a more sustainable foundation for what we want to go forward. Very, very aligned with the concept of the donut, as Erinch led this conversation with, and staying within the boundaries of the planet and of serving society as a whole. So for those of you who are interested in learning about all these different models that we've been studying, we put out a report about a year ago on different alternative ownership models, which does largely focus on the US, but pulls in some examples from Europe and the UK as well. And we're excited to see some of this work expanding, and we're talking to folks in other regions of the world about where this is showing up and how we can support developing the movements there as well. So switching from steward ownership to employee ownership, I'm really, really excited to talk about these models and really get into an amazing example we have here on the call today. But just to frame it, I think everyone here has worked at a job, and when workers govern the business and are participating in the decisions that are made, or at least electing leaders and having more through lines in ways that are not available in a conventionally structured enterprise, it really changes what it means to work. The autonomy that's gained at the worker level, I think it shows up in the products and services, the relationship with community. These are really kind of tangible factors that just are building a new way of doing business and relating to each other. And for those familiar with the cooperative movement, that's a really big piece here. But in the US, we also have other forms of employee ownership. We have the employee stock ownership plan, which is more of a retirement plan that provides workers ownership over the shares of the company. We have employee ownership trusts, which have a very flexible governance model and kind of allow each company to say, oh, this is how we want employees engaged in the governance, and this is how we're going to share profits. And whatever the model is, I think it's important that every enterprise kind of has their own way that they want to go about doing this, and that's great. We're here for this broad example. So pretty soon I'm going to turn it over to Margot and David and have a conversation about an investment from Seed Commons into Water Bottle and Appalachian Field Services. But first, I wanted to give a sense of where the capital fits into this using the data and conversations that we've been collecting in the US here. So I mentioned there's several different kinds of employee ownership models. We counted 28 funds in the US that are focused explicitly on employee ownership across North America. So it includes some funds in Canada. And across all those funds, they have about a total assets under management of about 500 million US dollars. And keep in mind, there are some other funds that will do some employee ownership deals, financing a conversion or funding some startups here or there, but these are kind of the funds that are, explicitly focused on this. But one thing that I wanted to frame this conversation with was we talked to all these funds, and across all of them, they're all trying to raise $670 million over the next year. So if we're going from 500 million to over $1 million, that means actually we're trying to look to double the amount of money in this space. And that's just at the fund level. There's plenty of other lenders that will also support this ecosystem. So that gives a sense of the massive acceleration we're seeing right now of interest in employee ownership and the cooperative model, at least in North America. And I think that's really telling that people are coming to this from lots of different ways and really want to see this this model succeed. So that's something that we are super excited about at Transform Finance, because we're helping to bring in more forms of catalytic capital and educate and socialize these concepts with impact investors to help bring in more opportunities to create these businesses. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that later on in the session. So with that, I want to introduce our next panelists that I'm going to have a conversation with. We have David Lids of Water Bottle, who's in a nice, beautiful city block in Baltimore, Maryland. Jealous of that outside Zoom screen, and Margot Dalal of Seed Commons. Okay, before I start getting into the questions that I prepared, I just want to acknowledge that the three of us are the US delegates on this call, and obviously we had an election yesterday. So as part of the framing, I wanted to ask both of you, given the results of that election that we probably are all aware of, how do you see this work being important in this moment?
Who first?
I'll leave it
I'll go. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
Please, David. Yeah.
Okay. I think in the recent election cycles, what my take is, we've seen elections of anger, of hopelessness, not of elections of hope that we might have experienced in previous decades. And I think the anger is about people feeling like they've been stripped of opportunity. So in the example that I am sitting in right here, what that looks like is a Baltimore that used to be an industrial city and all the manufacturers left. It also is a Baltimore of segregated neighborhoods where there was a government policy of disinvestment or exclusion in neighborhoods. And that has turned into a lot of anger that people are expressing at the ballot box, probably in the wrong way. I think the oligarchs have done a masterful job at getting folks to vote, act on their anger in ways that are against their self-interest. And I would just say how this all relates to the work that we're doing. If the workers had owned the factories in Baltimore, the factories would never have left, right? Nobody would have been on that board and said, oh, I vote for that factory to go across the seas. And if the neighbors had actually owned equity in the streets and the neighborhoods that they lived in and had the power to make decisions and how investment was brought to that neighborhood, they would never have been disinvested or oppressed or excluded. And so the answer to me is so obvious and very reachable, and that is ownership, stakeholder ownership. There you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I just absolutely echo what David is saying, and I think something I was saying this morning in our planning is that the work that we're doing and the ways that we're trying to change systems like finance are they're global, right? We're from all over the world thinking about these different ways of doing business and building new economic structures, and I think that is going to happen regardless of which two-party system is in office. Like building a new economy is kind of transcends that political system. And I think that like the work that we're doing on the ground is necessary no matter which politician is in office, right? So I think that, yeah, I don't want to necessarily say like we just keep doing the work no matter what, but it is this is like very, very long-term work. And even earlier we were talking about like the benefits of business for short-term and long-term goals. And I think these are really long-term goals that we're trying to support to create lasting change. So I don't think it happens in 4 years. I don't think it happens in 4 years. So I think we're trying to do things that are much more lasting.
Yeah, thank you both. Yeah, would be remiss not to kind of address the context that we are working with here. But with that, I want to turn it back to David and just ask, yeah, can you give an overview of your company with a specific focus on the governance structure and how you're engaging workers and the community in that governance design?
Yeah, quick overview, I think, is a quick history. We started off as a construction company called Appalachian Field Services. That company started when I myself first got sober and couldn't find any work. But I found that there's this shitty underbelly of the American housing finance system that doesn't care about your background. And that is the work of managing and maintaining foreclosure stock. So those crews took me in, and I just stayed with that and eventually started forming my own contracting company in that little niche sector. And as the job need expanded, I did what you do to stay sober, which is to help other people. And so I just hired folks that were coming back from incarceration or addiction, not because I'm a particularly great guy, but because that's what you hear. These are the things that you have to do to save your own life. Starts way back in 2002 and 2003. All of that stuff kind of grew. We finally did recognize that we had morphed into what's called an employment social enterprise. We started opening up sober houses for folks that were coming back from jail and rehab. And now we had like this full-blown, well-rounded kind of programmatic thing that got very, very busy during the Great Recession. And during the Great Recession, we noticed a couple of things. One is that the large institutional housing finance institutions that were hiring us to board up or change the locks or clean out or renovate their foreclosure stock did not care that we were doing this really important social mission, didn't care at all. And so they were not really trying to support our program, and really they were just paying us really crappy. So that sucked. And number two, we noticed that when they sent us to neighborhoods of color, like here in Baltimore or in Prince George's County, Maryland, they sent us to do a very different set of work than what they sent us to do when we went out to the Washington, D.C. suburbs. In the Washington, D.C. suburbs, where wealth lives, we renovated properties and got them ready to be put back on the market and used as a home again. When we got sent to Baltimore, we put, you can't see any boards up, and end of the story. We put boards up. So we got tired of that. We became aware of the history of extractive, oppressive housing finance in the United States, and we came up with a thesis. The thesis was, hey, if we, the workers, could become our own developer, if we could buy these row homes in Baltimore, we could develop them, we could fully renovate them, and by being the developers ourselves, we could catch that layer of profit and pay ourselves better, offer ourselves better benefits and better training and career paths. And once tenants start moving in, we would try to keep folks that are in the neighborhood. And as tenancy found a foundation, we would offer those tenants equity in this portfolio that we were building. So we didn't know any of this terminology at the time, but what we were imagining was a multi-stakeholder cooperative approach to rebuilding what we call in the United States redlined neighborhoods, which are neighborhoods that were by design oppressed, discriminated against. So that's kind of what it looks like. It was a very economic and social justice kind of motivation. And to your question of what is like the structure and the governance look like now, Kurt, it's like strong. We have committees, we have a board, we have people, we have a Discord channel where there's like lots of live dialogue going on. We have elections. And so I would say it's robust. And I would also say it's very early stage. Like we kind of don't know what we're doing. You know, committees form and kind of get together and say, oh, what is it we're supposed to do? Oh, we're supposed to develop a affordable housing policy. And you're asking, you know, people who've just maybe come back from jail to, you know, write an affordable housing policy. So I'll kind of shut up with that. And then I hope we get back into the financing piece of all this. But what I've just described there is kind of what you want. It's like really rich. It's giving folks who have been oppressed the opportunity to like step up into roles that maybe they never imagined, never hoped for, or maybe never wanted. But these are roles of power. These are roles of influence within their own communities. And yeah, I'll stop there. It's kind of beautiful.
Yeah, amazing. I can't wait to dig in a little bit more, David. But I want to turn to Margot, you know, and so I'll just say Seed Commons is one of the most, you know, unique groups in the, you know, the worker ownership and cooperative space. So I want to see from you, you know, describe Seed Commons' unique role and, you know, how it is bringing capital to organizations like David's.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Kurt. David was talking earlier about factories and if workers owned factories, we might not be in this this political situation that we're in. And that's actually a point of the origin story of Seed Commons in the early 2000s in Argentina. When there was this huge neoliberal economic change in the country, workers of factories were occupying factories, and there was a need for finance. There was a need for finance to kind of address these reformed factories and to allow workers access to capital to keep these businesses going and keep earning wages for their families. This is what's inspired the start of Seed Commons. Eventually, about 10 years ago, it'll be 10 years next year, when the Seed Commons started actually forming as a network in the United States, it was actually there was a response, or there was a strategy to think about how we can divest from Wall Street and divest from fossil fuels and invest in people and local communities in the United States. So Seed Commons is a national cooperative network of organizations in the United States that are able to work with the communities in their local area. The example in Baltimore is Baltimore Roundtable for Economic Democracy. They're the member, or we call the peer in Baltimore, that finds projects like Appalachian Field Services, is able to build relationships with them, and then ultimately provide that technical assistance and that lending capital to make possible what David just describes AFS does. So we're unlike traditional lenders because we have this this network, right? We're not a national lender that works from one city and does lending, you know, from one city across the US. We have these really deeply rooted community organizations that are building these relationships, and that enables us to kind of you know, lower the risk for investors, right? We have this large pool of capital that's being deployed all over the US. And our fund is democratically managed. We're democratically managed and operated by the members of the Seed Commons. So the members ultimately have decision-making power on the board of Seed Commons overall, and then on our loan committee as well. So we're definitely trying to practice what we preach in terms of shared and distributed ownership. And then the last thing I'll say about what we do is we're really thinking about not only how capital has been, sorry, I have something in my eye. We're not only thinking about how, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. We're not only thinking about how capital has been used to be extractive, right? We want to think about using capital to benefit the community and benefit people who have been so harmed by capital, right? People who have lived in cities like Baltimore that have been redlined, people who have been really removed from the economic systems, as David was mentioning, people who have been formerly incarcerated, people who have maybe not traditional educational backgrounds or maybe are undocumented. Those are all people that we believe by putting them first and investing in them first, that's how we can change the economy. That's how we can create really strong jobs with dignity that ultimately lead to things that we're trying to solve for, like ownership and democratic civic participation, obviously. So we're kind of trying to use these different things all at once. Non-extractive capital that doesn't harm the communities that we work in, that comes with a lot of technical assistance, that isn't going to harm communities if something doesn't happen and loans aren't able to be repaid. We're not harming community. And then also this really decentralized, locally rooted model across the US.
Amazing. Yeah, thanks, Margot. So David, obviously Seed Commons is not your typical lender that, you go down the street to a bank and, that's how they're talking. So I want to ask, in your relationship with Seed Commons, what's your experience from the business side and how does it compare to the financing conversations you're having with other potential investors in your business?
Yeah, I think I'll answer that by taking us back to the moment of introduction. So when we had this brainstorm of this community equity model, we thought it was a very holistic, like kind of a no-brainer model. Hey, there's all this abandoned housing stock. There's a shortage of housing. We should be able to get some money to fix up these houses and we should be able to create jobs. Like this is like just a well-rounded holistic approach to revitalize really distressed neighborhoods. But at the time, 2016, 17, and 18, when you went out into the impact investment world and said you wanted money for residential housing, everybody said, yuck, we don't do that. We like to invest in businesses, which was really surprising and disheartening. But so the result was we were moving towards pivoting to this worker ownership model just to take care of our own interests. And we started buying up these shell row homes ourselves using really, really extractive, awful credit arrangements. They're in the United States, they're called private money lending, hard money on the streets. These are like 15, 16, 18% loans at the time. And then when that ran out, we used credit cards, which is even more. So then around in 2019, we heard Kate Khatib on a podcast, and we knocked on the door and began discussions with Seed Commons, and they came in and financed the conversion of this single owner LLC, which was the construction company I had started, Appalachian Field Services, into a small worker co-op. And by then we had already bought 3 houses. So they secured the loan by refinancing those first 3 houses and getting us out of that awful debt. So I think Margot would affirm that Seed Commons also didn't imagine itself getting into the business of residential mortgages, but in that moment did. And then over time has reiterated, refinanced, rethought that financing to where we're at today. And that is a $5 million line of credit, 3% interest, 30-year amortized. We can use the loan to both purchase and renovate the properties without having to do these refinance or seasoning trigger moments. So what that is a highly, highly, highly impactful piece of CDFI financing. I can't think of anything that's as impactful and as smart as that. And what I've just told you is that we kind of walked this path together. Seed Commons, Bread, the Baltimore Roundtable was highly involved in with us on the streets, figuring out what the hell we were doing here, took it back, thought about it, churned, came back with a new product, each time a slightly lower interest rate. Margot can describe how they do it. I don't know how they do it. I just know they were here with us, walked the walk with us, and over time got us to this moment. And then to close out, I think we've also we have $5 million emptied Seed Commons coffeers a little bit, or Margot can speak to that. And we've also built up a capacity where we can deploy $5 to $10 million a year now, responsibly and effectively renovating these properties. And we can't find tranches at that level. Like when we're out shopping for more money, it's either $1 million or $50 million, right? Nobody wants to get in and help us expand this model to the next stage. So I hope that answers.
Yeah, no, thanks, David. I'm realizing, so we have till 15 after the hour. So I'm gonna take one from Annika's book and ask the two of you kind of the same question and ask for, doesn't have to be super rapid fire, but maybe a minute each. For those on the call who are interested in the cooperative model and are maybe concerned about seeking financing, is like, I don't know who my local Seed Commons is, or if that even exists. How would you how would you orient them? What advice would you give to an entrepreneur looking for financing? And I'll start with you, Margot.
Yeah, sure. I think ideally you would get a lender like Seed Commons that, as David was saying, we were thought partners in this together. And I think what I love about Seed Commons is that we're not creating this fixed set of loan products that entrepreneurs need to fit into. We can be flexible and kind of co-create products, if you will, that actually are meeting the needs of the business. As David said, if we only had a $50 million or a $1 million loan, that wouldn't fit the growing needs of Appalachian Field Services. I think that part of that is us as a lender being open to being educated on the business model, on the growth plan. And I think that is something that entrepreneurs maybe shouldn't have to do, but certainly should, as they're thinking about these different types of ownership structures, right? There's many different types of ownership structures. As I was looking into just now, the stewardship model, there's different types, right? And so I think that that's something as entrepreneurs we need to be prepared to do, is not only educate owner or investors on the concept, but the different options, the competitive advantage, the sustainability advantage, right? The longevity of it. These are all really good business models. They're sustainable business models. It's actually employee ownership is, within the spectrum of employee ownership, it's a very bipartisan topic. In the US, a two-party system, the whole political spectrum can find benefit to employee ownership and broad-based shared ownership models. So I think that really focusing on that as a sustainable business opportunity that can have a competitive edge, that can have a longevity is super important. The last thing I'll say is that showing the employee buy-in, as in even as a source of as an asset, right? As an asset, when you have employees and workers that are bought into the business model, they care about the bottom line, which lenders want to hear. So that's what I'll share. What do you think, David?
I would say that one of the things we haven't talked about is that we've been fully for-profit all along. So I would start with a small focused business. So I described a little construction company of 8 individuals buying 2 or 3 row homes at a time and then coming to Seed Commons. So we had a little bit, we kind of knew what we were doing, and we had a little bit of history, and we had books, and it was small and manageable and easy to get your head around. So that we were first showing that we could survive in the market. What I'm talking about is not being grant dependent. And then once you do that, in the United States, what you look for is CDFIs, which is what Seed Commons is, a community development financial institution. Google it. We'll talk about it a different day. And you can get a CDFI to come in with this impactful investment. And then you might look for a grant partner to help you get through those early piloting years, or to help you solve for some of the social or economic programmatic lifts that you're going to have to carry. And like that, if you start small with a business model that actually works, and you reach out to partners who are actually going to engage and teach and walk with you, I think you've got a pretty good chance. And I should have mentioned that with the Seed Commons journey, we went from that three houses and 8 people, workers, and $500,000 initial loan to 28 houses today, 30 workers, 17 co-op members, something like 20 tenants now. And the wage range that we have shifted from went from being $11 to $17 pre-seed, that's funny, to $18 to $48 an hour now. So that just needs to be added to what this journey can look like, but it needs to start small and smart.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, both. I'm gonna send it back to Erinch to bring it all together now.
Sounds great. Thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Margot, David, and of course, Stefan, Lara, and Annika earlier as well. We're going to reconvene all 7 of us now into a mega 12-minute panel at the end. A reminder to people, we're doing a deep dive into 2 specific kind of models of worker ownership and steward ownership today. But what Doughnut Economics is about is unlocking the breadth of ownership design that actually Margot touched on, and of course everyone has touched on in different ways. It's about thinking through what is the business, how is it going to drive the kind of impact it needs and unlock the strategies it needs, and what is the appropriate design for that business that will be able to pursue that with ambition. So there's a huge range of post-growth entrepreneurship and social enterprise models and guardian shares and asset locks and nature on the boards and all sorts of derivations and hybrids that are emerging in this space. And that's very much the energy of it. A lot of the questions, guys, that came up were around going a little bit deeper into the specifics of the cost of capital, the risk profile, the expectations in terms of the terms of loans, for instance, and the sources of finance, for instance, behind Seed Commons and Evergreen as well at Purpose. So maybe we can start with Lara and then Margot, reflecting on any specifics you're able to share around this space.
Yes, thank you so much. It was really interesting also to follow your conversation and get to know about your projects. Yeah, I can be a little bit more specific and feel always free to also, because we don't have so much time, get in contact with us afterwards if you're more interested, or you can also find some on the website. But, well, like the return profile, I would say what we're trying to do is finding the balance between what is really a fair return and what is enough for us. I mean, we have to definitely pay like our costs of working this way, because it's also, there's a team behind it, as at Seed Commons will be the same. And also we try to pay out like a capped and like fair return also to our investors, because we also have other investors in our steward fund. But all the time, we are trying to really see like what's enough and where's the balance of this. So that is it's like I can't say a real number, but actually we are providing equity. So we are like also taking all the risk and really going into the obligation, and this is also seen in the margins we charge. Does that answer your question?
And Margot, do you want to jump in from your perspective on the terms of loans, for instance, and the financing behind some of this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll say that we do have a cost to our non-extractive model. primarily through the technical assistance that we provide to loans, so to cooperative projects. So all of those 40 organizations that make up C Commons, as I mentioned, they are nonprofits. They do grant. They have grants to support that technical assistance. That does lower the risk, obviously, for our investments. We aim for a capped 5% return to investors. Most of our investors are very values aligned, so not all of them are looking for high returns or even expecting returns at all, and that's, you know, that's a choice that they can make. Many offer zero, you know, or investing with 0% notes. So we do, you know, try to obviously have a return to investors, but most of the time we are working with investors that understand that this work, you know, you can't necessarily have extractive capital and do good at the same time.
That makes a lot of sense. And I mean, one thing that feels like it's coming out from the questions and maybe that underpins it is that if you're an entrepreneur and you're setting out, a lot of the ecosystem is directing you towards venture capital. It's directing you towards a particular model of enterprise in terms of if you're at an incubator at a university or a local sort of, you know, accelerator program for startup entrepreneurs, you're going to be pushed in a particular direction. And often what we hear is that we don't know where to start. How do we look elsewhere? We already began to unpack this a little bit, but how does, for instance, this model, both models, differ in terms of the approach of investors to, say, a regular VC, a regular venture capital fund, and their experience of trying to drive the sort of behavior, strategies, and growth that they'll try to drive? Maybe we can kick off with Annika and Kurt, and then see who else wants to jump in on this.
Maybe first another reaction to what you just said. I work for the Purpose Foundation, which is a nonprofit with the mission to bring this concept into life. And we want every founder, every entrepreneur, every investor out there to hear about this. This doesn't mean that everyone has to adopt it, but if Stefan had heard about this when he was just starting this company, he could have already foreseen the problems or the regrets of a few years later. So our aim is to teach and to educate about this, and not to, you know, make sure that everyone adopts this. That's not the point. So if an entrepreneur comes up and says, you know, I want this sort of capital, it differentiates from the VC, but they can also, of course, choose the VC model or the VC way. What Laura said before was the key difference is that the control remains with the entrepreneurs, whereas in a VC model, the control would be with investors to a certain degree. And the second difference is that in our case, the shares are usually redeemable, meaning the company, for instance, in the case of PEC, the company gives back, or the company buys back the shares that they gave to investors, and after a certain amount of time, could be 100 years, could be 2 years, the company bought back all their shares, so they free of this investor, meaning there's no open-ended kind of way for investors to extract capital. I'm not sure if Stefan, if you want to add something from your perspective, how this is better.
No, I think you made a very clear point, and I'm aligned with all of your words.
And I would just jump in to say, you know, we always, you know, look, you know, at the top of the capital chain. Like when we're thinking about venture capital, like where are the demands coming from that is driving their behavior? You know, there are these LPs in the venture capital funds that are looking for certain kinds of returns, and the fund managers are telling the story of, you know, oh, we know how to pick the next unicorn. And, you know, we are gonna, you know, find the company that will have massive, you know, 100x growth that will, you know, pay for all the other failed investments that we have. So this structure creates this environment where the portfolio companies are not necessarily all seen as needing to succeed and be healthy and sustainable businesses. Like we just need one, you know, it's a roll of the dice, it's gambling. And, you know, this is something that the folks at Zebra's Unite Cooperative have done a lot of work and saying like, oh, we don't want that model. Let's have, a bunch of like 1.5 and 2x companies. Like, wouldn't that be great? And then to Margot's point in the chat too, what does it look like when you have investing in early stage companies that are not focused on an exit, so selling them to another company, another buyer, or to do an IPO and to have that value stay with the workers? It's a completely different model and mindset shift. And that's why I think it's so important to have folks like Purpose and Seed Commons that are demonstrating ways of doing this kind of financing that are not built on those pretty extractive relationships.
And this question of, I guess, the patience of the capital, the question of alignment with investors, and the question of what constitutes a fair return seems quite pivotal. I wonder, Stefan and David, like from your perspective in how you experience the investment coming in, how was that sort of tailored for what your business needed for it to be focused on its purpose, for it to be focused on its mission?
Well, I'd say the first thing, it was debt. I mean, and not equity. And I've been highly protective. I've been highly, I don't know, selective in pursuing debt and not equity, because if the whole idea is to build wealth in neighborhoods that have been stripped of it and then keep that wealth in the neighborhood, I'm trying not to sell pieces of the equity pie to folks that aren't here actually getting dirty with us. And then even, I'm not a VC. I don't hang out at the VC club as much, but I understand the model a little bit. I think you can make a case that we will hit a critical mass where it will look something like gentrification in this neighborhood. We will have renovated enough of these properties that they will double in value maybe in 5 years. I think that's a fairly realistic, but maybe a little bit optimistic. That's only 2x. All that to say, I can't really, I still don't quite understand how equity or VC comes into this model, but it is 2x. So I am looking for ways to be creative and looking for smarter equity minds than mine to come in and look at neighborhood reinvestment and tell me what that might look like. In the meantime, 3% 30-year amortized debt, however Seed cooked that up, that shit is the best. So we would like more of that if any of you know where we can find it.
Okay, we've got 1 minute left. I'm going to direct a very quick question to Laura before we finish up. Laura, do you have anything to say about some of the decentralized banking approach that kind of came up in the comments earlier, and also about when you turn down investees? Maybe we can do 30 seconds on either of those or both of those.
The turning down of investees, you mean for like, what's the reason for us to turn down investees, or?
Yes, that's right. In what cases, I'm reading the question, when have you been needing to decline investment for a company who has turned to you? What have been your reasons to stand out?
Okay. Well, really short. I mean, obviously, we still at all times we still look if it's a viable business model. If like we try to really establish a relationship with the team, with the founders, and like if we really feel that the common understanding of this really different kind of DNA of the company is not aligned, we usually also try to be very honest that this is not for everybody. I think we've said it before. This is the path. Like taking this special ownership structure is a very important decision, and it really goes into all the path of the business in the future. So it really has to be because you believe and you feel this is the right thing, and not just because you're looking for some capital. I think that's like the main takeaway after the first years. Stefan is nodding, so I hope I put it right.
Well, we're a minute over. I'm also going to invite anybody who would like to spill over to the open space. We have an hour slot in the open space to continue conversations among the participants. All the panelists are invited if they would like and are available as well to join that. It requires going back out and into and joining the open space session on business and enterprise. But for anybody that wants to engage in this work, in these ideas, go to doughuteconomics.org, and the drop-down menu of themes and business and enterprise, everything is contained on that page. Thank you for joining. Thank you for being part of what is an exciting creation of the future economy. I think on a day like today, we can think of embedding the generosity of nature, the human spirit and democracy into the very deep design of enterprises and of finance itself. We're doing that hard work, and these organizations and people are doing that hard work from the ground up. And I think that's what inspires all of us to keep going. So thank you all for joining. Thank you for your amazing work. And we'll see you at the rest of the sessions on Global Doughnut Days.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.